Hi again, everyone. Patrick Finkston here. I write the Illinoize political newsletter at the Illinoize, ILLINOIZE.com. Thanks so much for joining us on our weekly podcast as we're trying to get back to a weekly schedule here in the slower-ish summer months, but things aren't really that slow out there anyway, as politics and campaigns for 2024 are starting to ramp up, which is going to be the focus of our conversation today. Is the uh, bare knuckle brawl of a congressional primary that's about to shape up in Southern Illinois, as former gubernatorial nominee Darren Bailey, who lost by over 500,000 votes to J.B. Pritzker in 2022, announced on Independence Day that he is challenging Mike Bost, the incumbent congressman in Southern Illinois in the 12th district. Includes a little bit of the Metro East in St. Clair County, kind of has Scott Air Force Base and some of that area surrounding the more democratic areas in Belleville and East St. Louis, of course. That includes Carbondale, goes all the way up to Effingham and almost to Charleston, Mattoon. Bost has a bunch of new area that was the old Shimkus district. He won that seat heavily in the new map in 2022. He's been in Congress since defeating an incumbent in 2014 in what was a maybe more contested middle of the road district back in the old 12th in 2014. Bailey, of course, is trying to stay relevant. He's now running for his fourth office in 4 years. He ran for the House in 2018, the Senate in 2020, governor for 2022, now Congress in 2024. So it's a guy who is putting the name out there and seeing what kind of trees he can shake. We'll talk all about this throughout our show. We'll be joined by Brenden Moore from Lee Enterprises, the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, the Bloomington Pantagraph, Herald and Review, Southern Illinoisan. He was at Bailey's farm on the 4th of July for the announcement, so we'll kind of walk us through his reporting there. And we'll get some perspective from a Southern Illinois-based Republican political consultant named Michael Butler. He works with our friends at Core Strategies. He is a Bost alum, so we can get his perspective on the race as well. First, though, I want to play you some clips from Darren Bailey's announcement on Independence Day that I have some critiques of course, and also want you to hear some of that. For those watching the video, these are cut from their live stream, so it's not the highest quality sort of stuff, but it will do in a pinch. So why is Darren Bailey running for Congress? He had to lay out a thoughtful, intricate plan as to why he's challenging an incumbent, right? Nah.
Friends, our nation's at a crossroads. We find ourselves engulfed in a storm of woke nonsense. Woke nonsense that seeks to divide us. Woke nonsense that is eroding our values. It's undermining our principles, the very principles that make this country the shining beacon of freedom and opportunity. But I want to tell you something. I refuse to let this continue. I refuse to stand by while the radical left rips apart the very fabric of our society. Together, we must rise up and fight back against this assault on our freedoms. And the reason I'm here is because we must fight back and reject the weak-kneed politicians who refuse to stand up and fight.
By the way, that weak-kneed politician he's running against and alleging Mike Bost to be is a former Marine.
Today, on this family farm, the echoes of our founding fathers can still be heard. We draw inspiration from their sacrifice and commitment to a better future. Like the farmers and everyday people who stood tall during the American Revolution, we must rise up and fight for what is right.
Is he calling for a revolution?
This fight is not about anger or division, as you'll hear. This fight is about unity and restoration. It's about rallying together, shoulder to shoulder, to put an end to the woke nonsense that's tearing us apart. It's about restoring common sense, embracing the values that have guided us for centuries, and standing up for hardworking families who deserve better.
So there aren't a lot of policy differences here. I mean, Mike Bost, who is a conservative, traditional conservative anyway, has even moved to the right in at times over the last few years. He joined the knuckleheads who voted to overturn the 2020 election. He voted with the far right against the debt ceiling compromise earlier this year. So there's not a lot of policy difference between Bost and Bailey. So what kind of a lane does it leave for Bailey? It looks like he's going to try to at least insinuate that Bailey or that Bost and Joe Biden are one and the same.
I have a message for Joe Biden, the radical left, and every weak-kneed politician who prioritizes their next election over the next generation. You may underestimate the power of the American people, but you do so at your own peril. We are a force to be reckoned with, and we will hold you accountable. If you sell us out, we will send you home.
All right, so a couple of things to hit on here that I don't know if that sticks. One, because he hasn't actually said Bost's name or mentioned Bost by name as a part of this. I don't know where he finds that opportunity to draw a contrast. And I don't think Bailey gave anyone a good reason as to why he's running, whether it was in this opening or in this announcement speech or in the campaign announcement video that he did, that was kind of an awkward, convoluted 3 minutes of pandering. But there are some huge challenges. Bailey has a lot of charisma. Bailey has a big set of people who think very highly of him, a strong group of supporters. But there are some big challenges facing him here. He starts this race with $0. He can't move anything from his state account over to a new federal account. And even if he could, he had less than $30,000 in his state account at the end of March anyway. Bost is going to start out with $1 million advantage here, not to mention the powers of incumbency. He's spending his time running around the district and getting a lot of inroads built, especially even in new areas of that district. It's not just the Carbondale, Murphysboro sort of base area that he's so strong in. So you're going to have a strong financial advantage for Bost in this race. And while Bailey can energize an evangelical crowd, Bost has a ton of organization. He has a crew and a team that knows what they're doing and how to drive voters out. You'll hear political types call it GOTV. And the speaker, Kevin McCarthy, is going to come in big for Mike Bost. The NRCC already came out strongly with a statement in support of Bost, and they're going to do and spend to protect their incumbent. And Bailey may just be trying to bank on a Trump endorsement here. I don't know if that happens. Trump endorses when it helps Trump. And does weighing into this race help Donald Trump in any way, shape, fashion, or form? don't get me wrong, Bailey can win this race, but this feels like so much more of a vanity project than it does a significant battle over policy direction of the GOP and what they want for Southern Illinois. All right, let's talk some more about this impending Darren Bailey, Mike Bost congressional race in the 12th Congressional District in Southern Illinois. We welcome Brenden Moore from Lee Enterprises. That's the Southern Illinois, Decatur Herald and Review, Bloomington Panagraph, et cetera, et cetera. Brenden was one of the poor reporters tasked with working on the 4th of July and headed down to the Bailey farm in Southern Illinois for the announcement on Tuesday. So, Brenden, I guess first, just walk me through, covering the announcement, because it's not like Zinnia is in your backyard. It's what, 2.5 hours each way from Springfield?
Yeah, a little bit over 2 hours. And it's one of those things where it's not necessarily that far distance wise, but there's no real direct way there. A lot of back roads, a lot of changing different roads. It's not like there's an interstate that goes right up to his driveway. But yeah, no, it was it was an interesting event. 4th of July bash, if you will, to make this big announcement. It's really hot and humid out, but he got relatively decent turnout. His campaign said about 300 people, maybe a little bit generous, but it was not a bad turnout.
Why Bost? I mean, here's the thing that I don't understand is Mike Bost ain't Mark Kirk. We're not talking about some squishy, moderate, voted for carbon sequestration or carbon tax, whatever the thing that Mark Kirk got hammered on in 2010 about. We're talking about a guy who voted with the Trump people to try to throw out the election. And I've known Mike Bost since he was in the House. I think highly of Mike Bost, though I think that was a stupid move. He's not a dumb guy. He's not a crazy guy, but he's thrown his lot in with some of these really far right votes at times. Part of that, I'm sure, is anticipating a challenge, but it's not like you can run around and say Mike Bost is a squishy moderate who's buddies with Joe Biden. So why this challenge and why now?
I think that's a very interesting question that a lot of people are asking, because not even Mark Kirk, but you could say that Mike Bost isn't even Rodney Davis, who, while a conservative guy, and a adept politician, had a very hard time navigating the Trump era and going from representing a swing district.
I mean, Rodney had to try and have it both ways sometimes.
Right. And then representing a swing district to running in a very heavily Republican district. Bost has never really had those issues. Even when he represented a more swingier district, he was always very conservative. He never ran away from Trump. In 2018, the former president came in to rally for him, and he ended up winning by about 6 points, I think. And like you said, I mean, this campaign, even during Bailey's announcement, there were no distinctions or contrasts made by Bailey between him and Bost on policy. And people that were there, I asked a few people, like, why do you think Mike Bost should be, I guess, thrown out of office? And they really couldn't give me a definitive answer or point to anything that he's done or hasn't done that would warrant him being thrown out. Because again, this is a guy that's been, he voted to challenge the results of the election last time. He's been endorsed by President Trump several times in his past races. He's endorsed the former president, in his upcoming race. And he has a very solid conservative voting record. So I think that if there is any opening, the opening that Bailey's going to have to really go for, and in his statements, he's indicated that he will, is that he's going to run a outsider campaign that makes the argument that Mike Bost is some swamp creature who's been in Washington too long, that he's listening to lobbyists more than his own constituents, and that but he's not a fighter, or not enough of a fighter. Bailey used that word a few times. Weak-kneed politician, fighter, maybe not directly at Mike Bost, but just kind of talking about Washington in general. So that's the type of campaign he's going to try to run. Whether it's successful or not, I think is an open question, because I think when people think of Mike Bost, and this question was asked about how is he not a fighter? I mean, he's a Marine veteran, for crying out loud.
Mm-hmm.
So, as you know, Patrick, he's kind of a bombastic, pugnacious guy.
Let my people go.
Exactly. I mean, that's how people first got to know him, was that tirade when he was a state legislator against former Speaker Madigan. And so I think it's a lot harder, and this is not going to be like Mary Miller versus Rodney Davis last year. I think it's going to be a lot more difficult of a needle to thread for Darren Bailey if he wants a shot in this race.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the insider versus outsider thing is got to be their line or their lane. I mean, Bost is a guy that's been in office since, what was it, 94, 98, whenever he was first elected to the state house. I mean, so
Right.
he's, but you brought up a point about the 12th and how it's drawn. I think old school politicians or political watchers would think of the 12th and think, oh, that's the Jerry Costello district.
Mm-hmm.
This ain't the Jerry Costello district.
No.
This, first of all, it had been, Bill Enyart won it in 2012 in a
Right.
close race against Jason Plummer, then lost the seat 2 years later to Bost. And since then it has, ballooned Republican. And then in 2021 for the 2022 election, they essentially drew out all the Democrats that were in St. Clair and Madison counties and put them into Nikki Budzinski's district. So this is, sorry, Carbondale Democrats, this is a strongly Republican district. So this is the race one way or another.
Right. I mean, it's Republican vote sync. The Democrats drew it to be a Republican district. It voted for Trump with 70%, I believe, in 2020. I think Darren Bailey carried 72% in his race against Governor Pritzker last year, and Bost himself, against a pretty, marginal opponent, got 75%. So that's the ball game. I mean, the Republican primary is the ball game. It's tantamount to the general election in a district like this. I would say, you brought up Jerry Costello's name. This district is probably a mix of the more conservative areas of Costello's old 12th district and the district that John Shimkus represented for a long time as well. And it should be noted that Darren Bailey's former Senate district is almost completely within this congressional district. So a lot of his former constituents, will be voting in this primary. But obviously, that's the very eastern part of the district, the very, Eastern Block-ish area. Whereas like Mike Bost, is probably going to try to run very strong in his core areas down by Murphysboro, Little Egypt, deep southern Illinois.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting, the math on this one, because a lot of the district was new to Bost in 2022 as well because of the remap.
Right.
So Bost ate up a ton of new votes that were the old Shimkus district, the old 15th district. And obviously both Bailey and Bost were on the ballot in 2022. So, while Bost has a head start of being their congressman for 2 years, gets to probably do some franking, which helps. But there's a lot of this district too. And, I think people who watch this video, listen to this podcast, or read my newsletter, read your stuff in the paper, they don't realize that the majority of voters aren't as in tune to this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And there are going to be a bunch of people who go in to vote just for Trump on March 19th next year, and may not know who Bost and Bailey are, or may not know the difference. And the question is, how do you expose yourself to all of these potentially new voters?
Mm-hmm. Right. And that's a really good point. I think that's why even with a lot of the advantages that Bost has with incumbency, the money advantage that he has, the franking privileges he can take advantage of, they can't rest on their laurels. I mean, they're going to have to run this race like they're 10 points behind. Obviously, against apples and oranges to compare it to Rodney Davis, Mary Miller, but I think that is proof, at the very least, that incumbency doesn't always protect you. And so, I think that they're going to have to be strategic in how they message.
Expand on that if you would, because the NRCC, the Kevin McCarthy's campaign arm, they came out on Tuesday night all in for Mike Bost. The NRCC stayed out of the Miller Davis race in 2022. You're going to see a huge push from the DC Republicans here.
And that's a major distinction. Obviously, they were not going to get involved in an incumbent versus incumbent matchup, but Mike Bost is the only incumbent in this race. They have no reason to hold back on attacking Darren Bailey. They were already out with a statement the day he announced, basically attacking him. They mentioned his very brief stint living in the John Hancock building, saying he moved up there to lose to J.B. Pritzker. And from what I've been told by people in the district that had kind of been around a while, is that the Oppo file on Bailey, even after the governor's race, where a lot of it was exposed, is still quite large, and expect that to be deployed, whether by the Bost campaign or by the NRCC or some of these outside groups. And I think another distinction too that we have to look out for is there going to be any outside money that comes in to help Bailey? I obviously, because Davis had a huge advantage against Miller in terms of his campaign account last year, but
the Freedom Caucus leveled the field.
Right, they leveled the field with the PACs, but I think a lot of people are wondering. I mean, is there going to be the same motivation to try and take on someone like Mike Bost, who's they probably donated to in the past and helped in the past, and is generally a conservative member of Congress in good standing. And so I think that that's going to be a significant thing to look out for here, because at the end of the day, I mean, obviously there's social and there's a lot of, ways you can reach voters, but TV is still the big one. I mean, if you can run ads, get your name, that's the best way to get your name ID up. And Bost, at least it appears at the outset, is going to have a pretty significant advantage in that way. Television markets, I mean, it's not that expensive in Southern Illinois, so I would expect.
You still have to buy St. Louis, though.
Yeah, that's true, but I would.
I mean, there's a ton of overlap. I mean, you've got to buy St. Louis, you've got to buy that weird Paducah, Carbondale, Cape Girardeau district. You probably got to buy some Evansville,
right?
And you've got to buy Champaign. It's not like buying statewide, but it's still a lot of overkill for one congressional race that doesn't reach any farther south than Effingham.
Right, and I think that Bost, I think one thing that he's going to have to do, and the NRCC, any groups that come in for him, they're just going to have to get his name ID up and associate him with the issues that matter to voters in the district, because I'm sure that there's going to be some residual name recognition for Darren Bailey just from his gubernatorial race. He's just a well-known commodity in the state, and so I think the challenge will be making sure that people know who Mike Bost is and what he's done. And there's a way to do that. I mean, if they execute, then I mean that shouldn't be a problem.
I feel like we're going to have a lot to talk about over the next few months.
A little bit.
Brenden Moore from Lee Enterprises at Southern Illinois and Bloomington Pantograph, Herald and Review in Decatur. Read all of his stuff there, and good stuff as always from Brenden. Thanks a lot, my friend.
Thank you, Patrick.
All right, let's jump into the politics of this Bailey decision. With what the impact is, and can Darren Bailey win, and what kind of primary are we expecting? We're pleased to welcome Michael Butler. He's a Southern Illinois-based political consultant, works with our friends at Core Strategies. He's also an alum of the Mike Bost universe, interned in his official office and worked on the Bost campaign in 2018. Michael, we appreciate the time, obviously, so people know where you're coming from, having worked with Mike Bost. We know you're obviously fond of him, but you know the Bailey people too. So we weren't surprised by this, but still the thing that's been in my head in the last few days is what the hell is his path?
Yeah, that's a good point and good question. I mean, they're going to have to try to make the case to voters that Darren Bailey is going to be an improvement on the work that Congressman Bost has done over the course of the last 10 years when he flipped that district in 2014. And I think that is going to be difficult. I mean, obviously, Darren's got a lot of grassroots support. We saw that in the last election all over the state and including, throughout the 12th district. So you're going to have those folks that are with him no matter what. And that, that's to his credit. He's earned that support. He's going to have to build on that if he's going to want to be successful. And I think that's going to be a lot tougher than they expect it to be.
Why do this? I mean, I wrote a column in the newsletter Friday that this is essentially just Darren Bailey's ego that is challenging a conservative who has even voted on some of the knucklehead stuff, like overturning the election in 2020. I mean, Mike Bost is no squishy moderate. So how do you run to the right of him?
I mean, you go through the list of, Mike's been endorsed by the NRA cycle after cycle. He got the national right to life endorsement. He's gotten that historically. He's already secured that this go around. He's been endorsed by Trump, multiple cycles. Trump came to the district twice in 2018. I mean, you look at his voting record, you look at a lot of these scorecards that these organizations put out, and Mike's getting 100%, 95%, 97%. The room for improvement is minor. Basically, I mean, it's very hard to make that argument, I think, but there is like a desire from a lot of people, or at least a segment of, maybe not a lot of people, but a segment of the Republican primary electorate that kind of wants that bomb thrower. They want people to, come into the room with both middle fingers up and then leave that way. And that's one of the things that one of the groups that Darren Bailey is going to be able to appeal to. I mean, we saw that.
And that's surely the Trump effect, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think
it started. I mean, you can say it started with the Tea Party in 2010, but it really took a foothold in the Trump era, right?
Yeah, and I think it's and also you've got this Illinois dynamic where people feel like they've been burned. Like, Ronner said he was one thing, he ended up being another on certain issues like abortion and immigration, etc. You saw it with the Irvin campaign where people kind of felt like Irvin was being forced on them, like, hey, you got to vote for this guy, whether you like him or not, because he's our, best path forward. So I think that's one of the dynamics that we have too, is that there's kind of this aversion or like a reflex to like, well, they're telling me to vote for this person, so I should probably vote for the other person. And that's not a good spot for us to be in, because I think it lowers our ceiling. Our ceiling in Illinois is kind of, I mean, we have a ceiling here where we're only going to be able to flip, so many state rep seats, so many state Senate seats, so many congressional. It's just the way the map's drawn the way it is. And I think these guys, unfortunately, end up lowering our ceiling by those antics. And it shuts us out of winning some seats that are, we maybe have an opportunity. It lowers that ceiling, which is a problem.
I think it's a narrow path, but I think Bailey can win. Do you think he can win?
Yeah, there's always a path. You never want to take anything for granted. Like, both of these campaigns have to be working around the clock. I mean, obviously there's a lot of new territory in this district. It went from, 12 counties to 34 to make up for that part of St. Clair and Madison that Mike or that the Democrats took away from the 12th district. But obviously there's a heavy population in that western side in the Metro East. Mike's going to be strong there and put up good numbers. And then you're going to have that eastern side where Darren's strong. So, Darren's got to find a way to cut into that western side. And then Mike's got to find a way to cut that eastern side. But Mike is going into this with an upper hand just because of how dense the population is in the counties that he has always represented. And you've got some counties that he represented as a state rep that, like Washington and some of those that, are familiar with him, like he's well liked there, like they know who Mike is and what he stands for. So, Darren's going to have some tough spots.
But does the regular voter who's seen Mike Bost on a ballot, other than 2022, haven't seen him on a ballot since 2014 or 2012, I guess it would be. I mean, I think there are political people who get into these, these bubbles that think, hey, we've got all this existing goodwill, or we've got all this existing name ID. Bost has a ton of new area in under this new map. He picked up, a heap of the old Shimkus district. So how has he tried to establish himself with new parts of the district, or even parts that haven't seen him on a ballot in 12 years? Because remember, I mean, Bailey was above Bost on the ticket last year. So how has Bost tried to ingrain himself in such a new district?
So obviously I only know what I know and what I've seen, and, from my communications with, the Bost campaign. So they're probably doing more than even what I'm aware of. But obviously they ran ads this last cycle, TV ads. They had, I think, 2 or 3 that they rolled out introducing Mike to that new district and running those. They ran those in that
super safe district. No Democrat was going to win.
Yeah, I mean, Mike won by what, 50 points or something like that against Chip Merkel. Like, everybody knew going into it that it was a joke, that there was no path for the Dems. But anyway, they ran ads in that district, in those media markets. They were introducing Mike to the district as he's a Marine, he's a firefighter, he's a small business owner, like he's fighting for you in DC and standing up to Joe Biden and those kind of things. I mean, on the official side, they've done remote satellite office hours in a lot of those counties. They intend to hit, every county in the district on the official side in some capacity. So that's going to go a long way. And then also they've been doing franked mail throughout the district, and taking advantage of that, and making sure that people are aware that he is strong on immigration, that he's standing up for our Second Amendment rights, that he's voted against the debt ceiling, etc. So they're pushing it.
I don't know, and you have a better lay of the land than I do. I last worked a race that was heavily in Southern Illinois in 2020. It was a vastly different GOP electorate than I was ever used to in, 2012, 2014, 2016, 2018 downstate. It has the Republican primary voter has morphed from pro-life, pro-gun, low taxes to all things Trump. How does Trump impact this race, this primary in 2022 or 24, I guess?
I mean, I think that Trump is that's up to Trump. Trump's going to have the impact that Trump decides he wants to have. I mean, obviously his options are, like, he could endorse Mike like he's consistently done over the course of the last couple of cycles. He could stay neutral, or he could, flip his endorsement and endorse Bailey. And we saw it in the Rodney Davis-Mary Miller race. Like, that was a key dynamic. But I think that there's a lot of differences between the Davis-Miller race and this one. Like, people keep wanting to, compare the two and say that, it's basically one's a carbon copy of the other, or that it's a very similar dynamic. But I don't think that's true, because Mike has a very different voting record. Mike's been endorsed by Trump multiple cycles. He stood with Trump, which obviously there was some daylight and there was some friction between Trump and Davis. And then also that other Davis versus Miller was incumbent on incumbent, where this is, incumbent Congressman Mike Bost being primaried by a non-incumbent. So it's a different race for sure. And Trump is definitely going to be a factor. And you see that both campaigns understand that by the way that they've approached this race so far. Trump's been going to or Darren's been to Mar-a-Lago. He's been to New Jersey. Mike went to Mar-a-Lago. You see it in the ad that they put out, That's a focus of that last, 30 seconds or so. So, but I think both sides think that they have a path to securing that Trump endorsement, and we just have to wait and see how it plays out. He's such a wild card, Trump is, that you never really know what he's going to do.
Michael, before we let you go, what, and I think it goes from here is what is the mood in Southern Illinois right now? I mean, I think, we talk at least in this newsletter and podcast and such about if Republicans are going to win statewide, they have to have a message that works in the suburbs. A suburban moderate, a suburban swing voter, even a suburban Republican generally is way different than a Republican or conservative in Southern Illinois. What is it? How are Republicans in Southern Illinois viewing their chance of success? Obviously this primary is going to go to the far right, and they're gonna go as far as they can, but Republicans don't have a candidate against Nikki Budzinski. There's nobody waiting in the wings for 2026. What's the Republican mood in Southern Illinois right now, especially as Republicans have kind of had their brains beaten in statewide over the last few cycles?
I think that when you take Southern Illinois and the Metro East and just kind of look at it like as, carve that out, we've made a lot of progress over the course of the last 10 years. I mean, you go down the list of all the state rep and state senate and county offices that we've flipped. So there's been a lot of momentum, and now we have to look for opportunities to kind of build on that momentum. Obviously there are some areas where we still got work to do, like, we got to finish flipping Madison County. We've got to we made a lot of progress in St. Clair and Jackson, but we've still got a ways to go there. So that is like part of the mindset down here is we got to keep what we've got and then flip what's left. And then once we do that, it strictly becomes GOTV. And I think that's part of the reason why a lot of people are, I travel the district. I'm in Southern Illinois, predominantly in the 12th. Sometimes I'm in the 13th, but I just hear a lot of people that are aggravated and disappointed by the fact that Darren Bailey is even doing this. They don't understand the reasoning. Obviously, Mike's got a very good voting record, and it's like, why? What's the logic and what's the reasoning behind this, other than Darren wants to be an office holder, which obviously we're short of, like you said, we're short of people that are willing to get in the fight and run for office and try to change the trajectory of our state. So you never want to beat up on somebody for running for office, but sometimes you've got to say hey, maybe this isn't the right time, or this doesn't really make sense, because this is going to be, obviously a lot of money is going to be spent. This is going to be a distraction over the course of the next 9 months. It's going to cause a lot of infighting, and it's going to like I said, it's going to lower our ceiling a little bit. And, we may not win other races as a result because, time, money, and resources are being spent on this one. But I do think that, there is a path to victory statewide. We can't give up hope on that. Obviously, we saw that with Ronner. We saw that within the numbers on the progressive tax, that people are willing to vote for people that think like us. We just have to get that message out there. And obviously, we're cash strapped, and we always have been, and we always will be. But, you look at previous races, there have been people have spent a lot of money and not been successful. I mean, you see what Richard Irvin, Michael Bloomberg, when he ran for president, he had more money than he knew what to do with. But if you don't have a message that's going to resonate with people, then it doesn't matter how much money you put behind it. They're not going to, it's like you're not necessarily going to be able to sell it if it's not something that people are interested in.
We'll leave it at that. Michael Butler, Republican strategist in Southern Illinois, former boss guy. Mike, appreciate your insight, and we appreciate you taking some time. And I know you were kind of fighting a coughing fit this morning, so thanks for fighting through that for us today.
Absolutely appreciate it. Thank you for the opportunity, and we'll keep at it.
All right, thanks so much to Michael Butler, political consultant in Southern Illinois, for joining us, as well as Brenden Moore from Lee Enterprises, Southern Illinoisan, Herald and Review, Bloomington Pantograph, etc. And thank you for taking time to join us. A lot going on, as you can imagine, out there in the political world, and we're going to continue to see stuff open up and shake up, and we'll keep following it here. Follow theillinoise.com for all that we're covering on a daily basis and writing about on each and every day. And we'll keep bringing you the best we have here on the Illinoise.